Okay.
Well, let me welcome back. And just to reintroduce you again, this is Cindy Hunt, the Chief of Staff for the Director of the Oregon Department of Education. Go ahead, Cindy.
Well, thank you, everybody. It's such a pleasure to be here, and I'm really intrigued by this process. So I'm going to share my screen and take you through some things tonight about education and its reaction to COVID-19 and how we're coping. So here we go. And, oh, there we go. And you should be seeing my screen that has a PowerPoint. Yes, I see a nod. Great. Okay. So, well, thank you. So I'm the Chief of Staff at the Oregon Department of Education. What that kind of means is that I'm the number 2 and my boss is Colt Gill, the director, and I do a lot of agency operations, but I've been in education policy work since the early 90s, so quite a while. But I have to say this year compares to no other year that I've been doing education policy work for obvious reasons. So tonight, I'm going to, let's see if this works. Oh, there we go. Okay. So tonight I'm going to take you through our K-12 school system generally at a really high level, the overview of both, our leadership structure and also some fast facts about the students who make up our system. I'm going to take you through a timeline of COVID-19, but from an education perspective, which may be a little different than what some of you are used to. And then take you through our primary guidance that we've issued for schools reopening in the fall. We call it Ready Schools, Safe Learners. And then finally, what we see as the next immediate steps relating to community metrics and comprehensive distance learning. Oops. So with those fast facts, so in our K-12 system in Oregon, we have about 580,000 kids enrolled in just our public K-12 schools. In addition to those 580,000, there's probably about another 50,000 that are enrolled in private schools in Oregon. Of those 580,000, though, enrolled in our public schools and school districts in Oregon, a little over 35,000 are enrolled in public charter schools, which operate somewhat independently from their school districts. About 38% of our students in Oregon are students of color. A little over 22,000 students were homeless based on our latest data collection, which was in 1819. And a bit over 53,000 of these students are English learners, with the most common language being Spanish by far. So that gives you a bit of an idea of who we're talking about in our school system. Our school system coming into COVID in Oregon, we have opportunity gaps between our white students and our historically underserved race and ethnicity groups. Overall, 81% of our students will graduate in 4 years from high school. But if you're a student in one of our historically underserved racial or ethnic groups, such as Black, African American, Hispanic, American Indian, Alaska Native, Native Hawaiian, or Pacific Islanders, only 73% of students graduate. So this does cause, and it exists, an opportunity gap between these students. But the good news is that in the last 5 years, this gap is decreased by 3.8%. So we are encouraged by that. Now, turning to the school system itself. So in Oregon, we're very much a local control state, meaning that a lot of decisions relating to school and K-12 schools in particular are made at the local level. So we have 197 school districts across the state, 132 public charter schools. Those school districts, about half of them or so are small districts, and small being less than 1,000 students. But more than half of our students attend school in a very large district, so more than 7,000 students. We also have over 70,000 local school employees who are employed by these school districts and charter schools. So as far as leadership of our K-12 school system, Governor Brown, in addition to being governor, is also by the Oregon Constitution, the superintendent of public instruction. And in that role, she appoints the director of the Department of Education, Colt Gill, and also the State Board of Education. And then both of these folks are confirmed by the Senate. The director of the department oversees the daily operations of our agency and also provides leadership to Oregon's public school system. They're also required to have been like a former superintendent of a school. The State Board of Education adopts administrative rules, and they also provide policy advice to the governor and the director. So my agency, the Department of Education, is the agency that administers everything from pre-kindergarten through grade 12. Today, I'm going to be focusing on our K-12 mission, but we also have the early learning division within our agency and the Office of Child Care. So we license child care providers. And we have the youth development division that focuses on youth who have left school up to age 24, getting them job skills and back into school and that kind of thing. Our agency provides leadership and technical assistance to those local education providers. We also spend a lot of time implementing federal laws, such as the IDEA, the Individual Disability Education Act. So that's the act that governs how we educate kids experiencing disabilities in our schools. The Elementary and Secondary Education Act, better known as ESSA, and most recently the CARES Act, which provided funding to our K-12 education system. We administer the state school fund, which is the primary source for K-12 schools. The last appropriation to the state school fund statewide was about $9 billion. We view ourselves as trustees of the state school fund. We don't get any cut out of it. It all passes through to those local school districts and then gets combined with local property taxes and some other revenues to fund our schools. We administer grant programs such as the Student Success Act. That's one of our newest grant programs. The High School Success Act, you may better know that is ballot measure 98 because all of you may have voted for it or against it at the ballot a couple of years ago. And then there's many other grant programs at both the state and federal program level that we also administer. We provide a lot of technical assistance and training to school districts. We establish minimum standards for schools that they have to operate under. So things like instructional time, graduation requirements, content standards that students must meet in particular subjects such as math, language arts, social studies. We sometimes receive complaints and concerns from constituents and other appeals relating to local districts decisions. These can be on topics such as discrimination, for example. And we hold school districts accountable for implementation of state and federal laws by collecting information from them and sometimes issuing orders and withholding state school fund dollars in really extreme cases. So back to those local districts. Each one of them is operated by local school boards, which are elected locally. And then each of those local boards will hire a local superintendent who serves as the administrator for the district. It's that local superintendent that hires and fires employees. Also, it's the local school boards in combination with these local superintendents who are operating their school property, establishing school calendars, determining curriculum for their school, budgets, and just a variety of other decisions. All of these are being made at the local level. One of the misconceptions that we run into about the Department of Education is that we have the ability to hire and fire local teachers or administrators, principals, that kind of thing, and we actually don't. Some people also think we have some control over school property, like we can direct a school district to allow someone on school property or not, or the use of school property, and we really don't. So those are just some of the misconceptions about how much authority we actually have. So now I'm going to shift to the timeline. So that was a really high overview of our K-12 school system in Oregon. So And in fact, you know, when I was reflecting back on this timeline, it feels like it's gone by really fast. And I had to double check some of these numbers because I was like, wow, you know. So for us, and what I've done is I've interspersed it with some of the numbers of cases as these decisions were being made. So for us, it really started March 12th. At that point, we had 21 confirmed COVID cases in Oregon. One of the things that was kind of different about Oregon is that some of our first cases involved school employees. So the Department of Education and some school districts were involved from the beginning because of that. Other states, that wasn't necessarily the case. They didn't get some of their first school cases until very much later, but that wasn't the case in Oregon. So on March 12th, Governor Brown announced the first statewide school closure until March 31st. This announcement had little impact at the time because most districts were heading into spring break. So they would have been closed anyway, but it was done. So then on March 17th, we jumped to 65 cases. And Governor Brown issued Executive Order 20-08, which closed schools until April 28th. So she extended the closure. Then on March 23rd, Governor Brown issued Executive Order 20-12. This was the Stay Home, Save Lives Executive Order. It wasn't specifically directed at schools, but it had a major impact on the communities around schools in that she closed retail businesses and told everybody to stay home. On April 8th, then there was the announcement that schools would be closed until the end of the school year, so the 1920 school year. Also on April 8th, ODE announced its first distance learning for all and how schools would finish out the school year for 1920. So we moved our public school system, all those 580,000 school kids, into distance learning in a matter of a couple of weeks. It was rough, to say the least. Also on April 8th, we issued the Graduation Pathways 2020 because one of the paramount concerns that came up in the spring was, how are kids who are seniors going to graduate if they can't attend school? So we issued guidance and told districts about, you know, if kids had already completed most of their, you know, K-12 experience, you could give them a diploma, and here was the route if they hadn't completed it. So that was on April 8th. Then on May 15th, we issued guidance for summer school. We have some school districts that have different programs that target different student populations in the summer, so that was necessary. And that guidance is still being operated under today until schools reopen in the fall. So then, June 10th, ODE, in partnership with the Oregon Health Authority, released the Ready Schools Safe Learners Guidance. I'll be going over here in more depth for the school year 2021. Among other things, what this guidance does is it requires school districts to submit operational blueprints for how they're going to operate in the fall by August 15th. The other thing that this guidance did is it also applies to private schools. Now, I haven't mentioned a lot about private schools up until this point because for the most part, the Department of Education doesn't oversee private schools. But now, because of the executive order directing private schools to also be closed and also have operational blueprints, we find ourselves also overseeing some aspects of private schools. Our cases, June 24th, jumped to over 7,000 in Oregon. Also on June 24th, Governor Brown issued the current executive order that exists, 20-29, which restricted in-person instruction at public and private schools for the 2021 school year.
Cindy, I want to just jump in really fast. We have about 15 minutes left in this section, just to let you know, and we want to leave enough time for questions if possible. So just to give you a time check. Carry on.
Yep. And then moving ahead, so where we're at today is that literally this week, we announced new community health metrics, and then several school districts in Oregon announced that their operational model for the fall will be distance learning. Okay. So the Ready Schools Safe Learners guidance that I was referencing that we issued for the fall, it was done within also keeping in mind how COVID-19 has a disparate impact based on race And it was done under this environment. The information that I'm presenting on the screen comes from the latest OHA weekly report. And basically every other racial or ethnic group that is non-white has had a larger impact of cases in Oregon per 10,000. And that impacts our students directly. When we issued the guidance, it was with 4 principles. We wanted to ensure safety and wellness of both our students and their staff, cultivate connection and relationship between students and staff and the adults in their lives. We wanted to center on equity, and we wanted to honor innovation in our local education providers. So the Ready Schools Safe Learners guidance, it directs school districts to create these operational blueprints and also to post them online, both at the local district site and at our site, so that they will be very transparent to parents and stakeholders. Seek input from local stakeholders about what they, how they'll be operating in the fall, and also provide quick resolution with concerns and complaints. The guidance has 8 different parts, which are on the screen. The first 3 are health focused, and those are the only 3 that apply to private schools. Private schools can follow the rest of them if they choose to. Public schools must follow all 8. And it provides a large amount of detail, both in requirements and also recommendations for how schools can operate. Schools could choose between one of 3 instructional models. They could be physically present in a school building, but with restrictions such as physical distancing. There's the hybrid model, where you could be in the school building part of your week and then also distance learning, and then comprehensive distance learning, where the student and the teacher are in 2 different locations. This could be online learning or virtual learning, but it could also be sending home like educational packets to students and that kind of thing, or being on the phone and connecting with the teacher. So all of our districts by August 15th were told to pick one of these 3 models for each of their schools. But then something happened. Oregon's case rate went up. So what I have on the screen is the COVID-19 rates in other countries who successfully reopened their schools. And as you can see, and then I have in Oregon where we were at May 25th, right before we issued our first guidance about reopening in the fall, and where we're at today. At first, we compared favorably to these other countries who had reopened. Today, we don't. So we recognize, as we're looking at next steps, that schools not only provide education, but they provide a range of other things. They provide meals to students who are in poverty, which a large percentage of our kids are. Access to medical care, connection to adults in their lives. Closing schools and moving to distance learning in the spring impacted some families more than others. People of color have been disproportionately impacted by illness. Some parents just don't have internet. Parents struggle to find childcare. And also for our younger students, especially our K-3 students and students experiencing disability, distance learning creates some significant challenges. We also announced this week, that we would start looking, that all districts should be looking at community COVID-19 metrics. On the screen, I have a couple of recent studies that stood out in this area and that helped to form our next steps moving forward. So one modeling showed that closing schools could prevent 2 to 4% of deaths from COVID-19. When you think about our schools, I don't know if there's another industry where you would send 580,000 people plus another 70,000 employees back into the same physical space at the same time in this environment. That's what our schools constitute. Another study showed that, if you do reopen, you absolutely have to look at critical factors such as the rate of infection in local communities, the size of the school, the age of the kids, and those kinds of things. So what this moved us to is that right now, based on numbers, most of our school districts will likely be doing comprehensive distance learning, at least for the first couple of months this fall. So what we did is we issued additional guidance around comprehensive distance learning that enhanced it from what we had this spring. So it also allows schools to be able to plan for this, which is in the spring, they literally had a couple of weeks to plan. We've directed that students should have access to standards-based grade level educational materials, daily interaction with one or more teachers who will guide their educational experience. We've ensured that CDL meets all federal and state laws, as well as having additional supports for emotional health and mental and social health, as well as family engagement. That was a lot, but I'm open for questions.
All right, thanks very much. Please put your hand up in chat. All right, I see a few folks here. All right. So wait a second, and I'll randomly choose between the folks who have their hands up. Okay, let's go with Sue. Oh. Sue, I think your mic is off. Or, yep.
There. Okay. What about families that both parents are working, or if it's single family, and how will the kids be taken care of? What about daycare, and to keep them on track if it's distance learning?
Yeah. So you mentioned daycare. So I mentioned briefly that our agency also oversees early learning. We are working to have more early learning slots across the state. We got some federal funds to keep our early learning providers afloat. And as a condition of receiving those federal funds, they have to be open. So that's not a complete solution, but I do bring that up as there are some daycares operating. We've also said to districts that they have to have patience, and also that, you know, like for example, if a student isn't at school one day, you know, they shouldn't be penalized for being absent, because it could mean that their parents were not able to facilitate that on that day. Also, we're telling districts to be flexible in that, you know, traditional learning is done during the day, and in this environment, it may be done any day, 7 days a week at different hours. Solutions that parents are finding is really varying across the board. Some are, you know, staggering work schedules. Some are doing it while they're at home themselves working. We're hearing stories of using older siblings in some cases. The solutions really vary. But I think what your question is getting at is that there's a lot of variation from family to family, and some families are better situated to be able to do this than other families. So this is a concern.
Okay, thank you.
All right, let's go with Tyler.
Thank you. I enjoyed your presentation, and thanks for all the information. One question I had is a kind of follow up on the metrics that you were talking about, how you're kind of gauging, you know, what is healthy and what is not. My question is, how accurate do you feel that these metrics will be at actually gauging the staff and the student safety? And also, do you believe that those metrics will be like implemented to build confidence for the parents, or is it kind of more to instill safety for the children?
Well, taking your first question about, I think, how accurate, as we go deeper and deeper into the situation, we have better and better information, so that becomes more and more accurate. We're also able to learn from other countries and other states. And so as we learn and as we have better and better data, we refine our guidance and we refine our direction. Relating to, you know, I think those metrics, you know, they're being used to keep students safe, staff safe, and communities safe. Because based on the studies that we're seeing is that we know if we send kids back to school, we know we will see increased cases in those communities. We know this. It will vary from community to community based on how much viral spread is in that particular community. It will vary based on the kinds of protections we put in place, such as wearing face coverings, physical distancing, washing hands, those kinds of things. We know that these are controlling factors. But I think that those metrics are being used for all of the above. So that's the thing that we're trying to weigh is that we know that schools, kids benefit from schools. We know that families need kids to go to school, but we also want to keep those same families safe. And so that's the crux of the issue.
All right, let's go to Jeff.
Hello. Hey, I appreciate your presentation. That was really awesome. I had a question because there was a little bit of rumor that there might be a chance of K to 3 at least being in person. Is that true or not?
That is true. What I didn't go into tonight, based on time, is that based on community metrics, there's a possibility for some exceptions to distance learning. And so for those communities that are seeing the data go in the right direction, so to speak, there may be a possibility of kids who are in kindergarten through grade 3 coming back under, social distancing, face masks, washing hands, those kinds of things. Also, in addition to that, another exception is for schools that are rural and remote. These are schools who are 8 miles from one another, and remote is, based on like a national kind of definition. And these are small schools, I should say, too, under 100 kids. So those are 2 possible exceptions. And then the third one is we have some groups of students who need in-person instruction. So these would be primarily our kids experiencing disabilities. That's a third exception, depending on where those metrics are.
Thank you.
All right, thanks. And I see I'm not necessarily going in order here. As I said, I'm randomly selecting among the folks who had their hands up sort of in that first round. And the next one is Lori.
Hello. You mentioned information about families of color. What is being done for children of color families financially to get them the technology, the internet, that information that they need?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So I briefly mentioned the CARES Act. So the CARES Act provided funding to states in a variety of areas, education being one of them. And in Oregon, it provided us money sort of in 2 funding streams. One went directly to school districts, and they can spend it on anything COVID related, and it's very broad. And we divided that amongst school districts basically based on the number of kids. The second stream, Oregon could decide how to spend it, and how we decided is that we would use it to support rural communities and other communities in getting greater broadband access and web access to support families who couldn't get it. So some of our districts, many of our districts will be utilizing those funds for that. Other districts are providing families with things like hotspots, for example. Another example I heard of from the spring where literally they put hotspots on school buses and drove them into communities so kids could have access. So there's really a variety of solutions going on, but statewide, it's using some of those federal dollars is what we're doing.
Okay, thank you.
All right, let's go to Ken.
Actually, my question was all about metrics, and both listening to the other questions and to your presentation, I really think you've hit it. My only remaining little bit is, to what degree do you think these metrics are going to be able to be widely spread in public so that everyone in the state knows that if the schools are open or closed, or if there's a change in mid-semester, it's not because of politics, it's because there is a quantifiable scientific public health reason why things have changed and we need to do something different, whether it's open more schools or close more schools.
Yeah. So the metrics that I cited to, they're on our website. They're on the Oregon Health Authority website. And the other metrics that are out there is by county and for the last 3 weeks, because we're telling districts you should be looking at a 3-week, what's going on for the last 3 weeks in your counties. So they are being published out there. I'm seeing them also in local media outlets, for example. I know Oregon Live has some of this data based on county, if not zip code even. Zip code was not the level we went down to. We only went down to the county level. So it is out there. We've been directing and advising school districts that they absolutely need to be working with their local communities and parents around this. Because prior to distance learning, we were hearing literally within the same minute almost from parents who were like, absolutely do not send these kids back right now. It is unsafe. And parents who were like, what are you doing? I want to return to school as normal as it was before COVID. And some of them were coming from the same communities. So there's a wide variety of opinions. But yeah, we're trying to publish all these metrics and be very transparent with them so that we've created like a COVID-19 webpage that has FAQs and just a ton of information on it, as has the Oregon Health Authority.
All right. I see there's 2 more folks on the list. Jeremy Adair, I'm sorry we couldn't get to you. We've gone 5 minutes over the time here as is, but please send those questions to us. Any of the staff members, you have our emails and we will pass them along. I'm guessing Cindy would be willing to answer a couple extra questions by email. So please send those to us or post them in chat and we'll get them from there. For the moment, we've got to move on to the next section here. So Cindy, thank you so much. Appreciation for your time. Thank you. All right. So we're going to move into our final small groups here. And there's going to be sort of 2 parts to this. The first part is going to be 10 minutes now, moderators, to look over the potential witnesses for the next session. You'll have a chance to choose 1 witness in each of the 2 focus areas. So I have a few minutes to discuss those and choose which witness in each one. You'll do the same kind of voting that you did before in chat, putting 2 numbers this time, 1 for each focus area. Then in about 10 minutes, we'll move into a final discussion, which today is going to be about the possibility of a 7th session. I mentioned that there is a possibility of a 7th session and that it would happen on Thursday, August 20th from 6 to 8 p.m. That's just exactly 1 week after the scheduled 6th session. And the 2 questions that the moderators are going to ask you are, 1, do you feel like you would like for the assembly to continue for a 7th session? And 2, would you be available at that time on that date? It's not necessary that absolutely everybody is, but if there are a bunch of people that aren't, that maybe means we shouldn't do it. So we'll sort of get an idea of that, have a discussion. Your moderators will be taking notes, and please take notes of what folks say on those 2 questions at the very end of the hour here, in the last 10 minutes of the hour. And then they will give you the link to the survey. This is the survey for the researchers. Remember that you can find the link and information for the Oregon Kitchen Table survey. That's the one going out to all Oregonians on your panelist resources page. So with that, let's move into small groups.